Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today. I'm really excited to be sharing with you one of my favorite add-ons that Western Computer has developed, the Container Import product. So for today's agenda, we're going to start off by looking at building a container and showing you that relationship to purchase orders. First, I'm going to review the mandatory fields, and then I'm also going to show you some of the other fields that have been created on the transport order that you can also populate. Then I'm going to go through adding purchase order lines to the transport order. I'm going to also show you if you have a need to split the quantity on the purchase order line where the container itself has less quantity than what was actually ordered, you can split that information. And we'll also view cubage and payload information as we're building the container. So let's go ahead and get into Business Central. I'm going to go ahead and go to my main page and bring up transport orders. This is where containers are built from. In the system, we call them transport orders. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new container from scratch so we can see all the information. And as soon as I hit enter, the next number for transport orders is populated. All of the fields with asterisks are the mandatory fields that need to be filled in within this container before you can actually release and post the container. There are a couple fields that you may not have the information for up front, and so we're going to leave those for now as we go through this. So one of the first fields that does need to be populated is the container code, and this contains the size of the container. So you can set up all of the container sizes and types that you have yourself. This is just a list of ones that we've created as an example. So I'm going to go ahead and choose the 20D. The container number is something that you may not have at this time, but it is basically the number that is assigned to the container so that you can track it, and that information needs to be filled in before the container itself is released. For now, I'm going to leave that blank. The next two fields with the red asterisks are the location codes that relate to the purchase order line. So in this case, we want to match up the location of the country of where the container is going to leave from, and then the final destination that the container is going to go into. And based on this information, when we add purchase orders to the lines, it's going to match this up and only show you POs that have these two values defined. Going back to some of these other fields, these are all now fields that are available for you to use as needed as you go through creating a container. So for a shipping line, you can identify and set up your various shipping lines that you use when identifying a container. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and choose Costco, and the vessel name goes hand in hand with the shipping line. So notice as I click down, this is only filtering on the vessels that relate to Costco themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this one. If you have a voyage number, you can populate that information as well. And now we go to the embarkment code and disembarkment codes. These are a list of your ports. So you can now choose the port that the product, the container itself, is actually leaving from. So it may be leaving from France, but it's leaving from the Agincourt port within France itself. And it's going into your west location that you've identified as west, but it's actually going to land in the port in LA. Then you have date fields, so you can put in dates that you expect the shipment to leave the port. You can put in the date that you expect the container to be received at customs. You can put an expected date that you expect the container to be received at your final destination location. The shipment date will be the actual date that the container ships, and so this goes hand in hand with putting in the container information and the shipment date prior to release. So I'll leave that blank for the moment. And then there's other fields. You've got ability to put in a seal number, a container tracking number. If there's a specific method, ship-in method code that you want to track, you can put that in as well. We also have fields for master and house bill of lading. And if your purchase order is associated to a sales order via drop ship, meaning that the product in the container is going to go directly to the customer, you'll want to turn on this flag to identify that you're only looking for POs that are drop ship POs. So let's go ahead and show you how to add purchase order lines to the container. Based on the two location codes that have been selected, you'll go to process, say get purchase lines, and this list will filter on just those POs with those two parameters. So as you can see here, it's listing the location of West and the in-transit location of France. You'll also see what the original quantity on the purchase order line is, how much is outstanding, meaning how much has been received already at this time. Maybe there has been some quantities received, and how much may be sitting on other containers that are out there. I'm going to go ahead. These are my two purchase orders and the 2 lines per purchase order that have been created. I'm going to go ahead and select each of these lines to add to my container. Notice as I do that, it populates a transport order quantity to assign, and it carries over how much is outstanding for that purchase order line. I do want to show you how, if you're going to be receiving less than what you've ordered, if you get confirmation on that information of the container that instead of 300, they only have 250, it's going to go ahead and split that line and actually create a secondary line of 50 so that you can track the inventory for the 250 against one container and have the 50 remaining to add to another container in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and do that for this one line. You can also see that if you have the item's net weight and volume set up, it's going to start calculating the payload and the volume based on the quantity that you're assigning to the container. And what you can match that up against at the very top is the max cubage and max payload based on the size of the container itself. So these are all parameters that you set up when you initially set up the container size. And as you start adding the items, and let me just unclick one for example so you can see, it starts building how much cubage and payload is being added to this container to help you identify how many items you can actually fit into that container. Once you're done, you'll click Create Transport Lines, and what that will then do is pull the lines that you've selected along with its quantities back to the transport order itself. What I do want to show you is you can now look at the purchase order. So this fact box is very helpful in navigating. So instead of me going out and looking at finding the purchase orders, if I want to take a look at the purchase orders associated to this line, I can click this option here and it will take me straight into the purchase order in read-only mode. Prior to me adding the lines to the container, there were only 2 lines here. But because we split this last line of 300 into 250 and 50, you now have 2 different lines set up here for that same item. You'll notice at the very right, we now show the link of the transport order to those purchase lines. So now you can see that these 2 lines exist within this container itself. Once we add a container number to the transport order, which we'll do at the time of releasing and posting, it will also go ahead and update that container number to the purchase lines for visibility.